And then she gets there and realizes, actually, not only does this man not understand me, he actually only is interested in me because he himself is wicked. He himself is a controller. He himself has actually deceived people into thinking that the way things are going is normal. And this is oftentimes what happens with creative people. Like, you are in a situation where you realize that the people that you thought were your friends, or who you thought were your teachers, your pastors, your, governor, whatever, right? You think that these people are doing what's right. You think that they're actually out for your best interest. But actually, they are the personification of true wickedness. Hello, darlings. Good day. I hope that you are doing well today, and we are going to be going straight in with the business because I have a baby who's going to be waking up soon. My house is a shambles. I am literally in the middle of a construction site, but yet today I felt the need to speak about this wave that is wicked and how it is affecting many people, specifically people who are creative and artistic. I wanted to talk today about how creative and artistic people are oftentimes demonized for being truth tellers, and how through this movie we are able to see that standing up for yourself is a lonely business. Making clear that you do not stand for what is wrong is something that can get you ostracized, is something that can get you demonized and persecuted, and is something that as creative people oftentimes we can't help. It's literally inbuilt within us to stand up for what is right. The other thing that I'm going to discuss today is just the concept of wickedness not coming in the form that you think it should. The concept of wickedness being extremely alluring. The concept of wickedness being something that is appealing, and that wicked does not always present as the green monster in the shadows. It is oftentimes right in our face in the form of a Galinda, in the form of a Madame Morrible, or in the form of somebody who you think should be the wizard, somebody who would represent that. It could be the mayor, it could be the prime minister, the president, it could be a pastor. These things do not always present themselves the way that they should. So we are going to discuss that today. We are going to get right into it. Just before we do, welcome back to our channel. I am Mrs. B, and I am one of the Velvet Devotion team. My husband is not here today, and don't worry, he'll be back. We're trying to start business. We're trying to get things going. As I said, middle of construction site. We're just trying to get to it. Okay, this is a whole ghetto setup. It's a whole situation, but don't worry, because we're going to be able to still talk and we're going to be able to enjoy ourselves. So yes, let's get straight into this. When I watched this movie, and there will be some spoilers at the end, but when I watched this movie, the first thing that was very, very apparent to me is that this is not actually a movie about witchcraft, wizardry, and circumstance. And don't get me wrong, as a Christian, we need to be aware of things that are going to be a gateway for us to things that are more corrupt, to things that would, confuse us or pull us away from Christ. And I do understand the concept that a lot of Christians don't want to talk about things like this because they feel that it's an open door to things that are more subtle and are more, wicked. And we don't want to do that. However, I do believe that as a Christian, it does not make sense for us to see something that is happening in the world that is so transformative and is such a movement in pop culture and in our understanding of what's going on in the world at this moment and how it's affecting people and how people's minds are being influenced, and not to talk about it. That just doesn't make any sense to me. In terms of being aware as Christians. We do need to be aware, okay? But we also need to be realistic. We need to understand that we are in the world, but not of the world. We do not, praise things that are obviously anti-God. But what we can do is we can chew the meat and spit out the bones. We can see something that is affecting people and we can talk about it. We can see something that is actually, creating a movement, creating things that wouldn't necessarily be spoken about otherwise. And we can talk about it and we can not get sucked in by that. Okay. And furthermore, if we are Christians and we are actually going to try and help people in the world, we need to actually understand where they're coming from. We need to understand why they identify with something. We need to understand why a movement is affecting so many people. And we need to know how to deal with it. So this is why I think today's video is going to be so important. This is why I think that Wicked has touched so many people, because the themes in Wicked actually have nothing to do with witchcraft, actually have nothing to do with magic or tomfoolery. And yes, these are things that are central theme, but the thing about the Wizard of Oz, when you go back and you look at the Wizard of Oz, the original Wizard of Oz, and I'm pretty sure it was the first colored movie that was ever made, correct me if I'm wrong, somebody in the comments, but Wicked was actually not Wicked. The Wizard of Oz was an entire world that was made up. So this, coming into it immediately, you know that this world is made up. It is not a world where people are in any way confusing this with reality. Okay, you've got munchkins, you've got pink ladies coming out of clouds and bubbles, you've got all kinds of talking animals. Nobody is out here thinking that the Wizard of Oz is real, the land of Oz is real. So when you deal with Wicked, this is how you're thinking about things. You're thinking about things in a way that this is a fantasy. Okay, but then when you get into the character of Elphaba, you realize very quickly that this is somebody that you can identify with, because this person is othered, because this person is discriminated against for the most basic thing ever, which is clearly nothing that she can control, right? Which is the color of her skin. It's something that is clearly and obviously showing that this person is different and actually has gifts and special ways of looking at the world that should be praised, that should be acknowledged as being a good thing. Okay, but because she is different, because she is a person who nobody understands, they persecute her, they bully her, they call her names, they ridicule her, and she is generally seen as being a bad person from her father, from the people in her neighborhood, to her school, right? And what's interesting about Elphaba's journey is that as creative people and as artistic people, typically speaking, and I'm not going to say this is with everyone, because there are some artistic people who they walk on water. Okay, they literally seem like they float through life because they're beautiful, because they're attractive, and they seem like they float through life because even though they have a lot of giftings and a lot of talents and a lot of skills, the package that they come in, which is good looks, a good conversation, opinions that seem to be, universally understood, because of all these things, these people are seen as being right. They're seen as being good people. They're seen as not being wicked. Okay. But then there are other people who, while they may have some variation of good looks, while they may have a lot of gifts and a lot of talents, because the gifts and the talents that they have are not valued by the society that we live in, creative people who fall into this category are oftentimes seen as being extremely problematic. They're seen as being extreme thinkers. They're seen as being extreme in every aspect of their life. They're seen as being weird. They're seen as being, just outsiders, right? And you oftentimes, as a creative person, as an artistic person, you may have felt this many times in your life, and you can't exactly put your finger on why you don't necessarily fit in. You can't exactly put your finger on, what's going on, but you know that you are not Galinda. Okay, you know that you are not the person who everybody loves, or you might be the person who people like initially until they find out what your opinions are, until you do stand up for what's right, until you do realize that actually I don't necessarily believe all the things that these people believe, and then you are othered, and then you are seen as a problem, and then you are seen as the enemy. And I want to get into that just for a moment. Without giving too much away for people who haven't seen the movie, basically Elphaba comes to a point in her journey where do you know what? Let me go back for a moment. Elphaba the whole time is basically trying to find a sense of belonging. She is trying to not control anyone. She is trying to not in any way, shape or form dominate. She's not trying to use her powers or her gifts to make anything a problem for anyone. The thing she is trying to do ultimately is fit in. She's trying to belong. She is trying to be the person that she was created to be, and she doesn't know what that is. She doesn't know why or what has happened to her or why her life is the way that it is. She's just trying to fit in. And so when she finally gets to where she's going, and I say she finally gets to where she's going because I'm not trying to give things away for people who haven't seen it, but when she gets to the point of reaching where she thinks she will be accepted, things are then very quickly they turn on her. They turned around so fast. And where she was, because she gets, okay, I'm going to say some things because otherwise I just won't be able to explain it. She gets to a point where she is accepted a little bit. First of all, she's bullied and she is seen as being weird. Then she is accepted a little bit. And then she goes to where she thinks she's going to be accepted the most, because she thinks the wizard is going to be able to understand her giftings and be able to understand where she is coming from. And then she gets there and realizes, actually, not only does this man not understand me, not only have I surpassed everything that he thought I was going to be in terms of my giftings, but he actually only wants anything to do with me if I'm going to do what he says. He actually only is interested in me because he himself is wicked. He himself is a controller. He himself has actually deceived people into thinking that the way things are going is normal. And not only is this causing people pain, but this is actually causing an issue all throughout Oz. It's causing an issue with me because I don't want to be the person. And it's funny because this is Elphaba, right? But this is oftentimes what happens with creative people. Like, you are in a situation oftentimes as a creative or artistic person where you realize that the people that you thought were your friends, or who you thought were your teachers, your pastors, your, governor, whatever, right? You think that these people are doing what's right. You think that they're actually out for your best interest. But actually, they are the personification of true wickedness. They are actually the person who is making life difficult for you in the first place. And it's funny because there are 3 different levels to this, right? I would say there's the Glinda level, the Madame Morrible level, and the wizard level. So for those who haven't seen the movie, Glinda is a friend who bullied Elphaba, and she is a friend who initially became a friend because she felt bad. She felt guilty. She realized that she wanted to have more character than she does, but she's actually comfortable in where she is in terms of her popularity, in terms of her being able to, be somebody who appeases everyone. And she doesn't actually want to move from that because she's comfortable in that position. That is the form of wickedness that I would say is not necessarily the most destructive necessarily, but it is still bad. And the reason, and don't get me wrong, I do not judge Glinda for wanting to be comfortable because that is all she's ever known. And the fact that she was even able to step out for Elphaba and be a friend to her at all was a big step for Glinda. But when push comes to shove, and when she finds out along with Elphaba that there is actually a massive problem in this organization that is known as Emerald City, when there is actually a massive problem with this man called the Wizard, okay, and he is not who he says he is, and not only is he not who he says he is, but he is causing pain and destruction to people of Oz and animals and all sorts, she actually would rather stay quiet and do nothing than do what is right. She would actually rather be the person who is still seen as somebody who is non-offensive, then do what is the obviously right thing. Now, again, there's no judgment for that, because many people take this road. Many people take this road and they don't even realize that this is a situation that ultimately leads to destruction. They don't even realize that this situation, like, right is right and wrong is wrong. And even if you are non-offensive, the wrong thing is still going to happen to you. People are still going to get hurt just because you haven't offended somebody in the moment. And so us as creative people, oftentimes we have this burning desire in us to do what's right. We have a burning desire in us to see the company expand, to deal with the issues in the company, to deal with the issues in our families, because we know that in the long run, there is destruction afoot. Okay, in the long run, we know that these things are not going to help us, but we can't be the Glinda. And so essentially, Glindas oftentimes will go, you know what, you are doing what's right, you go ahead, but they will not support you. They will not stand with you. They might help you to get away in a circumstance, but they're not going to be by your side. And so you find yourself alone. Okay. The second form of wicked is someone like Madame Morrible, someone who initially seems to befriend you. They seem to be your friend. And I say this because artistic people and creative people, oftentimes they are used for their gifts and abilities. So it might be a manager at work. It might be one of the deacons in your church. It might be your sister-in-law, right? But Madame Morrible for me represents somebody who is going to make you initially feel better because you have been othered by everyone else. And she's somebody who's going to validate who you are and go, you do have gifts, you do have abilities, and I see you. I see your gifts, I see your abilities, and I see that you are actually not as bad as people make you out to be. Okay. When you find out that the Madame Morribles of the world are actually just workers for the wizard, are actually just behind everything, it is soul crushing for you as an artist, as a creative person, because you thought that you had somebody on your side. You thought that you had somebody who sees you, and actually what you have is an op. What you have is an enemy. What you have is somebody who has trapped you, who has put you into a situation that is incredibly dangerous. And what hurt for Elphaba most, you could see in her eyes in the moment where she realizes all this stuff, is Madame Morrible is actually the person who goes around and tells other people how wicked Elphaba is when she can't get her way. She gossip, and you know what's funny? Gossip is one of the most destructive things to an artist and a creative person. If you have somebody who was once your friend and who everyone knew was your friend, and then they turn around and start gossiping about you, start telling people that you are actually not who you say you are. You are actually a wicked person. You are actually controlling. You are actually demonic. You are actually all these things that everybody is afraid of. You are the witch. And that is something that really stood out to me, because I don't know about you guys, but I've had this happen to me multiple times in my life. Okay, I have been in situations where I have bent over backwards to prove myself to someone. And I say prove myself in terms of using the best of my gifts and abilities, using my voice to speak out on their behalf, using my voice to do work for them, to speak out for them, to perform for them, using my abilities to be the best that I could be. And this person turns around and says, you know, she's actually controlling, right? You know, she's actually a witch. You know, bear in mind, this person is actually the witch. This person is actually controlling. Like, when you watch the film, as I said from the beginning, the entire time, Elphaba is not in any way, shape or form trying to control anyone. She is not in any way, shape or form trying to use her abilities for bad, right? And if anything, she bursts out in the end and sings Defying Gravity, because she has to. They're literally trying to arrest her. They're literally trying to say she's a witch and essentially try and capture her, right? And who knows if she's going to get burned at the stake? We don't know, okay? We don't know what the situation is. All we know is that she needs to get out of there, and she has to use her ability. She has to quick time go into hyperdrive mode and figure out how to fly, right? As she's falling off a building, okay? Because these people have literally put her in this situation. Madame Morrible is actually the witch. Madame Morrible is actually the one controlling, manipulating. She is actually the one who is trying to destroy everything. And this, I've seen it too many times in my life. I have seen it too many times. And as creatives and artists, we need to understand that first of all, you're not alone. This has happened to multiple people and it will happen again. Okay. But when push comes to shove, you are not going to feel right within yourself if you do not do what's right. And that is what Elphaba did. The third type of wickedness that we have is obviously the wizard, the person who is orchestrating this whole thing from the beginning, the person who is literally making things happen or not happen. He's taking animals, making them not talk, making everybody think that the animals are crazy. Like, he's doing all these things behind the scenes. Sorry, I should have said spoilers at this point, okay? But he's doing things that are just dangerous, okay? And what he wants is to use Elphaba to read this particular book, right? And to basically create the world he wants to create. And it's so crazy because Elphaba realizes that actually the wizard doesn't have any powers, and that's why he needs her. The wizard has no power. And this is something that is so deep. It stuck out to me. And I remember it sticking out to me in the theatre production, because for me personally, as a creative and an artistic person, I have been in so many situations where I realize that the person who actually is in charge doesn't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. And they are using your gifts, your talent, your effort, your skill to promote themselves. And this has happened to me over and over and over again. Honestly, I have been in managerial position after managerial position. I have been in situation after situation where people will use my gifting, my talent, my wisdom to promote themselves. And they will say to you point blank, yeah, I need you to do this thing. I need you to do this thing. You have a gift. Da, da, da. But not only do they then not want to give you credit, but when you don't want to do what they want you to do because you are actually realizing that there is something wrong here, it is a problem all of a sudden. It is a problem. And this is something that I think creative people and artistic people probably resonate with like so much, because an artistic person, a creative person, is going to be a leader. You are designed by the Lord, if you are an artistic or creative person, to stand out in the area that your gifting is in. So whether your gifting is painting, poetry, whether it's graphics design, whether it's anything that is creative or artistic in any way, shape or form, you are going to stand out and you are going to lead in that way, right? And that is offensive to people. And it's funny because oftentimes you are trying to do what you're just trying to exist. You're trying to live. Elphaba was just trying to live. She was just trying to exist. It's not her fault she had powers. It's not her fault that she was special. But because she had powers, because she was special, people were offended. They were super offended, and they were willing to accept her when they were like, oh, she's going to the wizard. She's special. She's going to the wizard. And then when the wizard turns against you now, she's a witch. She's evil. She's controlling. She used all her... And it's funny because you think him and Madame Morrible are the same, but they're not. They have two different roles. And what makes Madame Morrible worse, I think, in a way, than the wizard, is that people actually know that Madame Morrible and Elphaba were close. Okay, so if Madame Morrible comes out and says, no, this person has a problem, they believe it. Okay, the wizard is different, and he's accountable because he is the head of Oz. So when the head of Oz is saying that you have an issue, when you have done nothing but try and do the right thing and try and exist in your purpose and calling, it causes you a problem. Now, how do we deal with this as artistic people? How do we deal with this as creative people? I think the first thing we need to do as creative people, as artistic people, we need to understand that God has given us purpose regardless of whether people acknowledge it or not. Okay? God has given us purpose, and it is actually required of us to step out on our own and walk in a direction that fulfills that purpose. Walk in a direction that means that we are going in line with the purpose of God for our life rather than what is easy for us. And in the end, that is what is better for you, and that is what is better for everyone else. It's so interesting how, and I'm not trying to make a comparison with Jesus and the Wizard of Oz, or Jesus and Wicked. But I am going to say this. Jesus did nothing but good things for people. He healed them. He walked on water. He turned water into wine. He healed the sick, raised the dead. And they literally murdered him. Literally. And I find it interesting how our movies and our productions and our creativity keeps showing versions of this happening, and we identify with it but we don't see that this literally happened to Jesus. Like, Jesus was literally the first person that dealt with this in such an extreme way. And I'm not going to say he was the first person ever on earth to deal with problems. No, we obviously know that human beings dealt with problems. But what I'm saying is, in terms of Jesus Christ being the person who literally had no sin, the Bible teaches us that Jesus had no sin, and he was here for us. He was here to save us, and we crucified him. We tried to destroy the light of the world. That is insane. And I think about this because it actually makes me feel better knowing that if Jesus had no sin in him, if he made no mistakes, if he did absolutely nothing wrong, but yet people still hated him and wanted to destroy him, why am I surprised when they're doing it to me? Why am I surprised when I see it portrayed over and over again in films and poems and, books? Why are we surprised when this keeps happening? As Christians, we need to understand that the world is a sinful place. We need to understand that while we are not, to idolize anything, we can take anything in life and use it as a reference point for what we should not be doing. Okay. And I think the reason this movie has touched so many people is because there are so many things in it that are actually reminiscent to the struggle that the Bible promises that we're going to have. The Bible literally tells us, Jesus literally tells us, in this life you will have trouble. In this life you will be persecuted. In this life, if you stand up for me, you will be misunderstood. Your family will turn against you. Your community will not accept you. This is what the Christian walk is. And it's so funny because we don't see it. We go through life worried and confused and going, why? But Jesus tells us to lay our burdens on him because he cares for us and because he actually went through it, because he actually understands it, because he actually not only orchestrated the world, but he's orchestrating things that are bad to turn out for good for those who love him. Okay. And I'm just going to leave it there. And I'm going to say, for all those who are Christians, understand that when non-Christians are looking at these videos and non-Christians are looking at these movies and poems and everything, they're looking for that space, that God-filled hole in their heart to be filled. They are looking for something to identify with, and this is what they identify with. And if we can actually say to them as Christians, this is actually already been done. This is actually, you know, just another version of man trying to recreate what God has already created. Like, it helps them to understand that these things can be these things can be dealt with through the power of Jesus Christ and through the power of the Holy Spirit. I bet you didn't think the video was going to end like that, did you? No. Okay, guys, I'm going to get going. I have been talking for so long. My baby's going to wake up. I want to thank you for staying this long. Please put a comment down in the description box below. And I'm hoping that sooner rather than later, we will be able to catch up again. Bye. No one loves the wicked. Popular. I want to be popular. Okay, I'm done. It's over.